Okay, that's good. That's good. Looks like we've got a stream up and running. So as long as our audio comes through, we should be we should be good. You need to go to the bathroom or grab a drink or anything?
Oh, I'm good.
Sweet. So how's your day been?
Hectic. I got my son Mobula 7 over for Christmas,
Right?
and we got it from Bangers, and it shipped with the European Union receiver in it, XM Plus, and so we couldn't get it to connect to his radio, and I tried flashing it today, and I couldn't flash it, and so it's been pretty good. Low double A.
Oh, looks like I forgot to unmute my mic. Whoops. I'll go ahead and turn your audio on too now, so let me know. They should be able to hear. You guys let us know if we can hear Michael better now.
Test, test, test. What's the delay on the live chat?
It's not too bad. At least when I used to stream, it wasn't bad. It was like 5 to 10 seconds.
Okay.
We'll see if that's the case anymore or not.
Okay.
I'm gonna drop a Facebook post.
Okay.
You want to share it to any groups or
Yeah,
anything?
yeah. Send it to me, or tag me in it or whatever.
Yeah, I tagged you.
All right. Let's see. All right, I got it.
Sweet. All right, so I'm cutting to the live screen now. We should be live. Let's see if we've got some people in the chat. Let us know. So welcome everybody to Random FPV Interviews, my new show. Glad to be back after a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm definitely happy to be back. And I've got my first guest tonight with us is Michael Rollins. Michael, we want to thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me, man.
Not a problem at all. I put up a post on Facebook asking people who they would like to see me interview, and you were by far the number one person people mentioned. So people wanted to see the interviewer get interviewed.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. It's a little humbling. I'm like, I don't know why people want to see me.
Man, you've blown up over the last little bit.
It has. It's been kind of a wild ride. But yeah, it has gotten a little out of control on occasion.
So I guess to start off, let's get to know you as a person a little bit better. Where are you from?
So I am from Virginia Beach. Though, you know, as a kid, we moved up and down the Eastern Seaboard. Met my wife in Greenville, North Carolina, or as they call it down there, Greenville, North Carolina. We got an echo on me apparently. And got married in Greenville, and then we moved back here in 2004. Had our first son in 2005. I'm a software engineer. I work for a startup out of Oakland. So that's a pretty intense job. But yeah, that's what I do.
You're an engineer, right?
Yeah. I write software for a machine learning company, so it's pretty wild, a lot of fun.
How long have you done that?
So I got my master's in computer science 2003. So it's been a while. It's been a long while, actually. I still don't think of myself as old, but like I'm 42 now, so it's pretty funny,
Well, I'm 38, so I'm not too far behind you.
right? Yeah, I was thinking about it today. I was like, I still feel like I'm 20, so it's
Yeah, me too.
probably legit.
You
Yeah.
look in your late 20s, early 30s, I would say as well. So nothing to worry
Oh, well,
about
thank
there.
you. I appreciate it. I got a little bit of
Yeah, you know,
silver in the hair, so
nothing wrong with that.
no, man.
And so with FPV, do you happen to remember the very first time you ever experienced it? Like, did you watch a video? Did you see it on TV? How did you find it?
So I'll tell you two stories. So back here, you can see my flame wheel. I walked into a friend's garage and I said, "What's that over there?" It's just parts sitting on a shelf. He's like, "Oh, it's a drone I never built." And so I said, "Hey, um, I had lent him a computer a few months prior, and I said, 'Remember that computer I let you borrow?' He was like, 'Yeah.' I was like, 'I'll trade you for the drone.'" And it was at the time a pretty souped up MacBook Pro, a few years old. He was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So I took the flame wheel home, had a controller and a bunch of other stuff, and it I spent, I don't know, weeks building it and figuring out the electronics, and then eventually flew it for a few months line of sight. And then the problem I had was that every time it would touch the ground, those arms would just break in half. And so I decided I was going to look for a sturdier frame. I found these things called mini quads. They were made from carbon fiber. I was like, let me check this out. And then I found uh, Chad Nowak's Hawaii Balls video.
Okay.
And once I saw that, that was all she wrote. I was done. So I I immediately started spending an extraordinary amount of money to get into FPV. Um, Built my first quad, which was a Nito Frames. It was the Sexy Little Beast 4-inch drone. And I followed their build recommendations, which was the build recommendations were pretty solid, with the exception of the 2206 2800 kV motors that they recommended. And I had no idea that was basically like strapping a rocket to a drone. And so for the first like 6 months, man, I just fought to control this thing.
It was a
But
little
my very
wild.
first, oh yeah, I mean, it's just like I had no. As a matter of fact, when I finally switched up to a 5-inch, I went down to what are the old Emax red bottom 2300 kV motors, which I think they were 2205 or 2206. And I remember flying it for the first time thinking, man, this thing's really slow. Like, why is this thing so slow? Shouldn't it be faster? So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it's been a lot of fun since then.
My first one was a real ACC. Uh, it was the 210X, I think it was called.
Uh-huh.
And it was a clone, of course, which I had no idea at the time that I was getting a clone when I got the kit. But
Yeah.
I did the same thing, man. I put some big motors on it and had no idea what I was doing, and it was
Mhm.
a battle for a while.
Yeah.
But I think it actually taught me. It made it easier once I actually got a quad that was put together right. You know,
Mhm.
I'm sure you can
Yeah.
relate.
Well, and it's kind of like I don't know, it's the whole adage, if somebody throws you in the deep end, you're either going to sink or learn how to swim. And I eventually figured it out. But it definitely it was a there was a steep learning curve there.
So fast forward a little bit. What are you flying now?
So now I'm flying. I've got two different quads. One of them got set on fire recently, so that's been fun.
I saw that.
Um,
Yeah, I saw
but
that
I've got
video.
I fly an MQC Fusion frame. Um, this one right here, which actually my buddy Rob Garland did the initial build on, has the MB Primo multicopter builder, Primo 2207, 2550 KVs. I don't even remember some Fox tier VTX. Um, was it RSXR? I fly Tranus. And then for my flight controller, I was flying like an F4 with a 4-in-1 ESC, but the ESC caught fire, so it torched the flight controller. On my other build, I've got the Hype Train motors, the originals. And man, that one's flying like a CL Racing F3. It's ancient. It's from like 2016. And it flies great. I don't even know which version of Betaflight it's on. It's on like 3.4, 3.5. And it won't even do turtle mode. I mean, it's just, anyways, that's been the one that's getting me along recently. So I actually really enjoy that quad.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Nope, nope. It flies relatively smoothly. So it's fun to fly.
So I want to give some shouts out to the chat real quick, if you're okay with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, do it.
We've got quite a few people hanging out. We've got Crossfire, Fellstar, Ginny from Brain FPV. We've got John Hart, who was gracious enough to do our thumbnail for today. So thank you for that,
Awesome.
John. We've got Joshua Kidder, Loco FPV, Mindless FPV, Remy Timmy, Southwest Kitty It, T-Mac FPV, Vampire, Vicious
Loco
Vice.
did this build.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah, yeah. Local guy.
Got windy and exhilarating. We want to give big shouts out to the chat. We thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you very much.
So I've been watching some of your recent flying videos,
Mm-hmm.
and I've noticed there's a spot you like to fly at quite a bit. Tell us about that spot.
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually a 5-minute walk from my house.
Okay, I figured there had to be
And
some reason.
yeah, no, I mean, number one, it's a super fun spot. There's just a lot of there's open field if you want to practice stuff, and then there's the wooded, slightly wooded area that you can do some proximity in, and then they recently cut down one of the two huge pine trees that were up there, so all of a sudden now there's a whole lot of like dive practice. Yeah, I mean, I work anywhere from 50 to 60 hours a week. I've got 3 kids. Getting out and flying is like I can only do it in very small chunks. Um, and so a lot of times I can only just basically step out the front door, walk down the street, fly for 3 or 4 packs, and then call it a day. And I could probably do that maybe once a week. There's a lot of other places to fly around here. I just haven't had the time to get out to them. I've got one spot in mind that's just a pretty awesome location. Of course, here in Virginia Beach, we don't have any bandos, and we don't have, um, there's not a lot of like big infrastructure or buildings. Like if I went to Norfolk up the street, I could potentially do some building dives, but I'd probably get arrested pretty quick. So yeah, so a lot of it around here is just kind of like park flying, but that's all I need to do, honestly.
I can understand. Well, I don't have a lot of. I'm in East Tennessee, and
Okay.
I don't have a lot of bandos here either. I like have a desire to fly bandos, but we just don't have them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Like it means that if you're in an area with a lot of abandoned buildings, it means that somehow the economy is probably crumbling or has collapsed. Um, but if you don't have bandos around, then it probably means the economy is thriving, people can find jobs. So um,
Catch 22, right?
yeah, it is.
Have you ever got to fly a bando? Maybe out of town?
Nope.
Me neither.
Um, Yeah, I've flown schools, I've flown office parks, I've flown regular parks. Um, where else have I flown? I mean, just various places. But that's pretty much it. And we've got some complicating factors around here. Like we have a master air base in the middle of the city. So at any given moment, there might be a group of F-18s flying around. So you kind of got to be careful. The helicopters come over at really low altitude. So you've got to kind of keep your head about you when you're flying, so you don't accidentally smack an aircraft.
We've got quite a few office parks that I've got to fly, but unfortunately no bandos yet. We've got some new construction that could probably pass for bandos that I've been trying to hit,
Yeah.
but I've not had great weather here recently. It's been raining quite a bit.
Yeah.
I gotta give a shout out to Double A in the chat. I missed him when I
For sure.
when I gave the shouts out. Double A is like the stream king. If there's a live stream, he will be on it.
I like Double A. I've heard a
he's
lot
a
of good
good
things
guy.
about him. I'd like to meet him one day.
Him and I have actually gone to a couple different races together, and we've had a great time. So he's a good guy.
Yeah. You do a lot of racing?
I don't. Well, I say races. We went to like Rampage together.
Okay. Yeah.
Events would be a better way to put it.
Yeah. I think I did one race. I think I've completed an official 2 laps in a multi-GP environment. Yeah. Hi, John Jordan.
I'm great at hitting gates, literally. I'm not great at going through them.
Right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. It would be interesting. Like the race scene around here is kind of falling apart. But if it were to pick back up, I think I'd probably at least try my hand at it. I don't know if I'd be any good, to be honest with you. But it would certainly be something to try. That'd be fun.
I'd like to get more into racing. I think I'd have to build some purpose-built stuff to do it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the first thing I do is just take all my freestyle rigs out there and just fly, just see if I even cared for it.
We've got a pretty good local group. There's actually a really big race going on tonight here in Knoxville, a big whoop race.
Ah, okay.
I don't know if you've seen some posts about that, but I think like
I did.
half the Rotor Riot crew are there.
Yeah, I did see that.
I think Exhilarating is there too.
Give a shout out to Loco. He used to be the race organizer around here. He organized all the races for years, and then eventually he had to step back. And once he stepped back, it just kind of fell apart, which was unfortunate. So
it can be hectic. I know. I'm sure you know, juggling a day job, trying to do the podcast, or the show, and then trying to stream, or trying to still fly. It can be hard putting it all in, especially when you throw family in there as well.
Yeah.
So let's transition to your show a little bit. For those that don't know, Michael does a show called The Michael Rollins Show, for lack of a better name, because he just can't think of one, right? That's what you always say.
That's what I always say, yeah.
And he has done interviews with quite a few people in the community. I've been watching them over the last couple weeks, and I'm really impressed, actually, with your interview style.
Thank you.
And you really get into some deep topics, too.
Yeah, so I actually, a lot of times when I jump into things, like the whole interview thing happened by accident, quite frankly. There was let's see what happened. Tyler from RDQ bought half of Rotor Riot. I put out a reaction video in like 45 minutes. I just happened to be on Facebook when it happened. The next day, a bunch of people were asking, Joshua Kidder seems like he has a real axe to grind, so we should get to some of his questions at some point. I think Joshua Kidder,
whenever
yeah, I think Joshua Kidder, he's got some angst he needs to get out. Anyways, going back to it. Yeah, so somebody asked me in the comments of that video, do you think this is Capper's exit interview? and or exit strategy. Like, is this how he's going to get out of Rotor Riot? He's going to sell it to Tyler and bail. And Chad responded in the thread, was like, why don't you just ask me? And I responded back to him and said, you want to interview? And that's what we did. And it just kind of took off from there. I mean, my channel went from, I think I had 400 subs at that point, and over the next week I put on something like 1,500, which was just insane at the time. I just kept going. The next person I had on was Lexi, and I don't know, I've had on Bot, I've had on Cricket, I've had on Chad Nowak several times.
Oh my God.
I've had on what?
You've had on
What
Oh my
happened?
God too, right?
No, I have not. I reached out to him at one point, and I think at the time he was dealing with some health issues in one of his family members, and so we just haven't had a chance to connect. I'd like to have him on, and actually I'm trying to figure out a way to get him on. I will say that, in all honesty, I kind of rode the back of a lot of the Rotor Riot drama for a while. And I think that shows in my stats, quite frankly. All of my top videos, and I mentioned this in like my year in review, all of my top videos in some way or shape or form go back to one of the old Rotor Riot cast members. And which is interesting in and of itself. And I've got a few thoughts about, why that is.
You're
But
welcome to
after a
expand
while,
on that.
well, I mean, the original Rotor Riot cast was, number one, amazing. As a group of pilots, they were spectacular. As a group of individuals, there was a lot of chemistry. And I think about that time, right when they started was when kind of like the first wave of, like, there had been a whole lot of stuff happening in the hobby prior to that, but at that point, the technology, everything started to come together. Rotor Riot just capitalized on it at the right time. And so I think a lot of like the people in this chat, I know me, our first experiences were with the Rotor Riot group. Like, we'd get on YouTube and a new Rotor Riot episode would drop and you'd watch it religiously, right? And I mean, I know for me, I was like, man, I want to be a Rotor Riot pilot one day.
Oh, yeah.
And I think everybody thought that, like, oh man, these guys, they've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, I guess 100,000 subscribers, and they must be rolling in money, and like all the pilots are getting, paid bank, and none of that turned out to be true. But I think a lot of people, when the first group of Rotor Riot folks kind of went their separate ways, I think in a lot of ways it kind of like crushed some people's dreams. Because that was kind of like, that was the dream, right? Like, you wanted to be a Rotor Riot pilot. For a lot of people, I know for me, I mean, I was like, yeah, dude, I want to be on Rotor Riot. I want to make FPV a career. Didn't quite happen that way. And I think a lot of people felt the same.
No, I felt the same way. I mean, there was a point where our hobby was growing so fast, new technology was coming into it so fast. And you have these pilots who are the epitome of flight. I mean, they were crushing it with their flight footage, going to all these amazing locations. Mm-hmm. Everything was just on this big push up, and the sky was the limit,
Yeah.
And
I think the thing that like, and I don't know, I know this is publicly known. I know Chad Capper talked about it. Pretty much, at that point they were owned by the folks that had bought Flight Test. Lauren, I think is their name. And there was the whole incident where Tommy dived the building in Atlanta, and Lauren came in and was like, we're not going to do that anymore. Or at least this is how I understand it. I might not be right. Chad ended up buying it back from them and taking it private. And when he took it private, it was based on his funding.
Yeah, the capital
so all of a sudden,
was no longer there anymore.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it had to turn into what amounted to a real business. And so all of a sudden they weren't making trips to Chernobyl. They were, flying around the Southwest or the Midwest or something like that. So it was definitely a really, it was a, I don't know, at that time in those circumstances, Rotor Riot was just a special thing. So
It's still special, but it's special in its own way now.
yeah. Yeah, and I agree with that. I like what they do now. I know that like my son consumes their content constantly. I mean, he loves all the trick tutorials, and he'll watch the trick tutorials and then go to the simulator and practice all of them. Don't tell him I said this, but he's going to be better than me pretty soon. It's just a different form of content now. And I think that there's a lot of angry folks with regards to Rotor Riot. So, but we don't have to get into that unless you want to.
Oh, we can go there. Why not?
Um, yeah, I mean, what can I say? Like I think the number of conspiracy theories that I see running around about Rotor Riot are pretty hysterical. Red Cat bought Rotor Riot, and they the FPV Freedom Coalition, Capper and Thompson have seats on the board, and so the FPV Freedom Coalition is just a false flag operation in order to fool people into giving all of their black box logs to Red Cat, so that Red Cat can then develop remote ID and make a killing and a profit from. It's like, come on, guys. Like, the conspiracy theories that abound are amazing to me. I personally think Red Cat bought Rotor Riot because they're playing both sides. I think they're going to be good in the commercial, and they're going to be good in the hobby, and I think that suits them just fine. So, and then I actually do think that FPV Freedom Coalition is independent, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can. Yes, I did say FPV Freedom Coalition. How y'all doing? I don't think you can. I don't know. I mean, I just think like the amount of angst that goes out towards Capper and a lot of those other guys is probably not warranted. And that's not to say that any of them are perfect, because if I've learned anything through all this, it's that literally everybody that I've interviewed is flawed, including me. And everybody is going to put the best spin that they can on their own story, which includes dropping details that might make them look bad. So can you trust what everybody says to you? No, you can't. So, I mean, there's a lot of drama in this industry, straight up. You've got so many tribal factions, right? Like you either belong to TBS or you belong to Rotor Riot, or you buy from Surge or you buy from Tyler, or it's just, there's so many, or Tyler can't get product from Trappy because Tyler wasn't playing by Trappy's rules. And it's just, I don't know, man. Sometimes it just makes me sad. I'm like, I harp on this a lot, and I just, I'll say it again. I'm probably going to stop saying it soon, which is that, we get to do something special. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of infighting as a result. So.
Well, we're a small group too. When you really step back
We
and
are.
look at it, it's not that big of a group. I mean, just like what
No.
you were mentioning, there's these one-on-one relationships. It's Tyler versus Surge, or it's Rotor Riot versus TBS. That's
Yep.
like 4 of the biggest names right there in our hobby.
Yep.
And when you've got such passionate people involved in the hobby combined with these small groups,
Mm-hmm.
it's asking for it, and I would love to see us be able to all come together at least to fight the remote ID thing.
I agree. And I'm planning on a video putting it out. I think there's a way that we can actually make a bigger noise than we are. Because I mean, as a community, in the US, there's no more, I think, than 100,000 FPV pilots, of which probably 50,000 are active. That's just not a drop in the bucket in comparison to the rest of the United States. And so in order to, as a group, in order to make our voice and our vote count, if you will, we're going to have to be smart about how we approach all the remote ID stuff, how we comment, how we do things. Um, one of my ideas is that why don't we all support all the bodies that represent us? So support the AMA, support the FPV Freedom Coalition, write your own remarks, support Bruce Simpson by giving him your proxy. The flight test, what's their thing called? The Flight Test Action Committee.
I think so.
Like if the thing is that the commenting period is not about voting. It's about showing representation. And if we all back all of these organizations at the same time, it actually makes us larger than we actually are. If the AMA can go talk to the FAA and say, we've got 300,000 members, and the FPV Freedom Coalition can go talk to them and say, we've got 50,000 members, and the Flight Test Action Committee can go to them and say, we've got 75,000 members. But really, that's all the same 50,000 members over and over again.
Right.
It actually increases our voice with the FAA, and then you can also go comment on your own as long as you're respectful, and have it count. And then you bring in somebody like Bruce, which yes, he's a foreigner. I mean, he's from New Zealand, but he's smart on these things. He knows how to talk their talk and fight their fight. Anyways, I put out a video that said, hey, we need to get together. We need to stand together. I think now it's time to put out a video that says, hey, this is how we should do it. So it's a crazy idea. It might not work. But if everybody were to go support all the organizations, that actually increases our voice, 4 or 5-fold.
I agree with you. I mean, I wish there was an easy way to get everybody to band together. I almost feel like there needs to be a new group that's nonpartisan, so to speak.
At this point, I don't know that it matters who's partisan and who's not. Because the one of the key factors is that we've got I think 60 days total to comment on the NPRM. We're through 20 of them. The people that carry the biggest weight in commenting with the FAA are community-based organizations, CBOs. There's 2 of those, which are the AMA and the the Flight Test Action Committee. I know that the FPV Freedom Coalition is working on it. So there's not time for a nonpartisan group to form. And I mean, what do you even mean by nonpartisan, right? Like, what does that mean to you?
I guess no involvement with any of said drama-oriented groups.
Yeah, I mean, but my point being is that why does that matter? If the game is actually to make your voice louder, then the more groups that we can back, the better off we are.
You make a great point.
Yeah. So even if you think the FPV Freedom Coalition is just an arm of Rotor Riot and that they're there to sell you out, well, it doesn't matter, because right now they're fighting the remote ID NPRM, right? You could say that Flight Test has their own agenda and that the AMA has their own agenda. Quite frankly, I don't think it matters. We've got 40 days left to comment on this thing. And if we don't organize very quickly, then that time will be passed. They'll pass the remote ID, and the hobby's over in 3 years.
That'll be a sad day. Let's hope it doesn't come.
I agree.
Have you left a comment on there?
I have not. I've actually been trying to. I'm going to, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to leave multiple comments. I'm trying to find a good template to go by so that I use the right keywords and so that I use the right language. I mean, simply getting up there and commenting "F you," That comment just gets discarded. It doesn't count. It doesn't count for the NPRM. And speaking of Voltronics right now, or Volatronics, I mean, the FAA can do whatever the hell they want at this point. They can take all the commenting and just flush it down the toilet, and we won't have a recourse except to go sue them in the courts. But at least we have a potential of a voice now. So yeah, I will be leaving comments. I'll be leaving multiple comments. I'll be leaving comments on specific things relating to remote ID, and everything else, as a matter of fact. I want to find the right template, the right format to do it in, so that my comment is coherent as possible.
So it's just not a wasted cause. I
Yeah.
understand completely.
Yeah.
I wish we could get somebody on from the FAA to interview.
Yeah, I don't know. I think probably the closest we could get would be one of the guys at the AMA that deals with the FAA. But I don't really see what a government member of the FAA would have to gain by coming on your show or my show. They might. I could be. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't know who you would even contact.
We'll have to look into it. Maybe we can get somebody. We can
Yeah.
try. So switching gears, let's go back to the Rotor Riot drama.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your honesty where you mentioned you basically have somewhat ridden the coattails of the drama. I've watched that, and I think it's awesome. You come up with some of the best titles for your interviews. That you're able to capture an hour-long interview in a sentence, and you really do it well.
It's gotten me in trouble a few times.
Yeah, I know you've had to change them a couple times, right?
A few times. Yeah, a few times.
Can you talk more about what happened with the Stingy episode?
Oh man. All right. So probably the first thing to note about the Stinger Swarm episode is that it is my most watched video to date.
By far, right?
By far, it's got somewhere between 45 and 50,000 views. The thing that made it blow up, I think, was, quite frankly, I mean, number one, it's Stinger Swarm. Like, who doesn't want to hear from him? He's like one of the most congenial, nice guys in all of FPV, and he's fun to talk to, and he's got a great beard.
Killer beard.
It's like, yeah, killer beard. And it's like, why wouldn't you want to spend time just hanging out with this dude, right? So number one, like, and he had all the Rotor Riot exposure, and he's part of the Atlanta crew. I mean, the guy is just, he's in a sweet spot in terms of being a draw, if you will, for an episode. Then to do the interview, and I'll be honest, that was the first interview I ever left thinking, oh man, I don't know if I want to post this. Because at the end of the interview, we basically came down to the fact that he might be giving up on making FPV his career, and he might go back to flying commercial airlines. And that was one of the first times that I really thought, man, that's like, most times I finish an interview and it's like, hey, that was awesome, man. That was so great. I really enjoyed it. When we finished his interview, I was just depressed. And I just thought about it for a few days. But I put it together and I put it out, and I titled the main segment, the one that led, the one that always gets the most views, Fired from Rotor Riot.
Bad move.
I mean, when I had interviewed Steele and Chad Nowak about, I hadn't interviewed Nowak at that point, I don't think. I think I had interviewed Steele. And when I interviewed Steele about Rotor Riot, I think I just titled it Steele on Rotor Riot, right? Like, just Steele's opinions on Rotor Riot. It got a lot of views. Something happened in the Stinger Swarm episode that I don't know that I can fully explain. I don't understand. which is that the comments section got like not just nasty, but disgusting. The comments that started rolling through were of a level of vitriol that I've never seen before and I have never seen since. And what finally, I didn't know how to handle it. It was the first time I'd ever been in a drama rodeo.
It was a lot too, right? It wasn't like
Oh
it was
yeah.
just one or two. It was,
No, I mean, it was just comment after comment after comment. And what finally pushed me over the edge was that someone called cricket the N word.
oh man.
And I was just like, like literally what the actual fuck is going on? Because like we're talking about Stinger Swarm, and why is cricket getting brought into this? People were making awful comments about Zoe. It was above the beyond the pale.
Past the line.
And yeah, it did cross the line. And I mean, and not to mention the fact that Drew was taking an extraordinary amount of heat because of it. Because I mean, ultimately in that interview, Drew got portrayed as the bad guy. That's the way it came out. But yeah, so I ended up not knowing what to do with the Stinger Swarm video. I called him. I was like, look, dude, I got to do something. And I pulled it. And I was really angry. And so I put out a reaction video to it basically that said, listen, you guys need to, shut the F up. If you don't, I'm going to shut the channel down. And I think that just fed fuel to the fire.
That says a lot about you though, that you would sacrifice your own channel for that. I respect that, man.
I mean, dude, I was angry. I mean, the comments were so terrible that like, I mean, there's very few times that I've ever like absolutely regretted something. I regretted that. I regretted it a lot. And I didn't know how to contain it. I couldn't control it. I ended up having a conversation with Kevin again later that afternoon. He was like, look, I would love to have the video back up. And one of my kind of guiding principles is that, the interviewee is at least partially in control of what they do, what they say. Like I have the timeout rule. If somebody says something they don't want to say, they can go back on it. It'll never air. And quite a few people have taken advantage of that. But at the same time, I want to kind of honor my interviewee. And, Kevin said, I'd like it back up. And we talked about it and he was like, just disable comments. So I did disable comments. I put it back up. I ended up disabling comments on the next video that he had come out. And I think I left comments open on the third. But I mean, it was to the point where people were going to other videos that I had on my channel all over the place, leaving comments that they wanted to leave on the Kevin video.
Golly.
Like, I mean, people like swearing and cussing at me in comments because I would dare infringe on their First Amendment right to freedom of speech in the comments. It's like, you guys are seriously.
If they had something decent to say, you wouldn't have done that. So
yeah, I mean, when you get down to just pure insulting, that's not okay in my book. If you've got some hard criticism, I think that's fine. Like I've had people deliver really harsh criticism to me, but they're right. And as a result, I listened, I changed. What was happening in the Kevin comments was just, it was bad. It was just bad. And so, I learned a lot in that instance. I didn't handle it well, quite frankly. But I did my best. So if there's one thing any of you can ever take away from this, pulling a video because of the heat is not the right thing to do. Just shut the comments off.
Right.
So
let's switch gears. You mentioned your timeout.
Yeah.
For those of our watchers that don't know, Michael, when he does his interviews, they're pre-recorded, and he gives his guests the ability to call a timeout if they say something they don't want aired or if something gets brought up. Um, can you share maybe an interesting timeout without sharing who was the person to give it to you?
Yeah. One of my interviewees started talking about some R&D that they were doing. And we got a good solid 2 or 3 minutes into a discussion of future products that they were planning on putting out. And this look of horror across their face. And all of a sudden they were like, I can't talk about that. Right? It's just like this sheer moment of, oh my God, like, hold on, time out. That cannot air. Like, we can't do this. Right. Yeah. I mean, that was one instance. It was kind of funny because, the person that I was talking to, that person is really smart, and that person is just a great person and very passionate about the hobby. And that person was so excited about the things that they were developing that person wanted to dive into it, right? And then realized that that's not what they could do. So it was pretty funny.
Have you found that most of your guests use the timeout, or is it kind of sparse?
I'd say it's about 25%, maybe 33% use the timeout. Everybody goes into it saying, oh no, I won't use the timeout at all. And then invariably, everybody who says that they don't want to use the timeout, they immediately, within like 30 minutes, oh my God, timeout, I can't say that. Yeah, so I've definitely, they're definitely recorded. There's whole recorded episodes that never aired. I've got a few episodes that the interviewee ended up reaching out and saying, you know what, I'm not comfortable with any of that going out. And so they're sitting somewhere unaired because they did not want to talk about it, or they didn't like the subject, or they had a night to sleep on it and they realized that wasn't a good topic. So I've had a few folks act on it for sure.
I know you've got a tier of your Patreon that allows people to hear the whole thing all at once, right?
Yeah. So one of the first requests that came out of it was like, hey man, I want a podcast. So prior to doing YouTube, at one point I produced a podcast a while ago. It was called Tech Moonshine. And I think it's still up. You can still hear it. It was with the guy that's actually my CEO now. We had a great time talking about tech. It's the first time I've ever produced anything, and I learned a lot about it at the time. And podcasts are funny. They can be really difficult or really easy to produce. But everybody wanted a podcast format. I thought about it for a while, and finally I said, you know what? I'm treating this thing like a business. It's not, it is for fun. Like, I enjoy these interviews. I like talking to these people. I like asking them questions where they're just like, man, I've never thought of that before. That's such a good question. But at the end of the day, like, I want this to be a business. And so I thought long and hard about, syndicating a podcast, putting it out for free. And I realized that would ultimately cannibalize my channel. And unfortunately, YouTube is still the majority of my revenue. It's not a lot. And I think we'll probably show it here later, but I made like $1,500 last year on YouTube AdSense. And I talked to a few folks, and a few folks recommended, why don't you put out a podcast on Patreon? Because, you can make it relatively inexpensive, but it's a way for people to give back to you and they get something in return. And so I put out the podcast on a $3 tier. And it has been pretty successful, I would say. I've got about 68 patrons. Most everybody is in the $3 tier. I've got a few folks that are on I've got like a a $1 tier, which is called For the Love. There's a few folks that are there. Most everybody is on the $3 tier, and then there's a few folks. I've got like a 5, a 10, and a 20. And really, the only perk I offer is the podcast. And there's a few folks on the 5, and there was at one point somebody on the 20, but he stuck around for a month, and I really appreciate him. But yeah, it's interesting, and occasionally a patron will go in, and they'll pop up to the $5 tier for a month, and then they'll pop back down to the $3 tier. What I've found is that Patreon and patrons in general, it's not about the transactional nature of what you're giving them. Like the perks and things like that are great. But these are the people that are your real fans. Like these are the people that care about what you do. They care about you. They have a vested interest in what you do because they like it. And that's really what Patreon is about. And Bardwell was the one that kind of put it that way to me. He was like, look, don't think of it transactionally. Giving them something is great. But at the end of the day, these people are here because they like you and they support you. And that's what it's about.
I may steal your idea and implement a podcast here on my Patreon when I get it going.
You should. And I mean, the reason being is because like, if this thing is a revenue generator for you and you think of it as a business, then you don't obviously want to cannibalize your primary source of revenue. Now, later on down the road, let's say I blow up and become huge, right? Then that gives me the capability of taking on sponsors, which I've taken on 2 sponsors and realized that I couldn't take on sponsors in the FPV industry because it wasn't fair, quite frankly. I took on Pyroflip and I took on Rotor Riot as sponsors for a very short period of time. Steel Rain FPV, if you can make it here, you can stroke my beard one time for free. Just saying. There will be no money shots, Voltronics. Sorry, just paying attention to the chat.
No, it's great. You're fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, so like so like if there's ever a time period where the ability to take on a sponsorship ultimately outweighs the ability to pull money in from, say, something like AdSense, then I'll probably put the podcast out for free. Until then, this is just a way to make a little extra money, which I mean goes towards things like my kid's Christmas or buying a quad part here and there. I tend to be really frugal about what I buy. And I think not last year, but the year before, I spent $300 total on FPV. I'm just real careful about what I buy and how I buy things. So
I know you're not big on having the newest and best, but you like what works.
Yeah. Like I'm still rocking a pair of Dom V3s. I mean, I'm sure that the HDO2s are spectacular and the Orcas are amazing. I absolutely refuse to put a pair on because if I put them on, I'll like them and then I want to buy them.
I'm still rocking HD3s. I totally understand.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, yeah. I mean, actually, quite honestly, my favorite goggles I've ever used were the Dom V1s. Something about them, and I think it was the limited field of view, and I really don't know why I liked them. But for a while, I flew with Dom V1s, and I was just like, these are great. And then I switched up to the Dom V3s, and like they're good. They're good. But the 16:9 ratio took a lot to get used to, especially when I didn't know anything about the 16:9 ratio and I was using 4:3 cameras. That was interesting for a bit. So anyways, yeah, I don't have to have the greatest gear.
Double A says you owe him a money shot.
Double A, let me run that by my wife before we go through that.
So something we talked about before tonight was you might want to go through some of the analytics on your channel. Do you mind to share with our viewers maybe some tips on how they can help their channels out?
Yeah, man, let's do it. Is it like, let me go back to the chat. I mean, I'm at this point, I'm pretty transparent. There's not a lot I have to hide. If folks want to see my actual analytics, I'm fine with that, including the money I make. Because, like I said, I've already told you how much money I made. So I can share my screen.
You know how to do that in Zoom?
Yes, it'll just, there we go, share the big share screen button.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Oh, wait. Come on. Sorry, folks, I'm struggling. All right, let's see. All right, can y'all see it?
Give me 1 second. I think I got to switch it over.
Okay. Let me know if we
All right, we
run
should
into
be
any
good
technical
now.
problems. All right. So I mean, for for anybody that's like hasn't really dug into YouTube, they used to have an old analytics view. This is the new analytics view. I actually like it a lot. You know, this right here, this is an interesting stat. It's your rolling number of the last 10 videos that you put out. What's the ranking of the current video? And at that moment in time. And so like you can see my ranking here. You know, Mr. Steele got jalapenos on his junk was pretty high. This particular flight video is doing okay. But I mean, it still has 559 views, which before the interview thing, I never would have gotten 20 views on a flight interview on a flight.
I was going to say that's pretty good amount for
it actually is for, and one of the things I've come to realize is that there's like there's this principle called hedonic adaptation, or the hedonic treadmill, which is that, like, let's say something really good happens to you, like you get a $50,000 a year raise. You will adjust to having that $50,000 a year raise until that's your new normal. And then it just is kind of not a big deal. So going from 400 users to 1,500, or 400 subs to 1,500 subs was way more exciting than going from 5,900 subs to 6,000, right? Even though having 6,000 subs is great. The jump from 400 to 1,500 was just like a freaking rocket ride. Like every day I'd binge on my stats and be like, how many subs do I have today, right? So anyways, yeah, this is kind of the view, and it shows you, oh, look, you know, your views are down by 39%, your average duration is down by 80, your watch time is down by 86.
You can't put too much stock into that, though, because you're coming off the heels of some big videos, right?
No, well, that's true. And one of the interesting things is that if you look at, and we're not going to stay here, we're going to go somewhere else. Let's just go to the actual analytics page. So here's the analytics page. You can see I've had 42,000 views in the last 28 days. This was Christmas right here. I took a week off. 6.3 thousand watch hours, which is kind of an insane number every time I think about it.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I've put on 144 subscribers. Here we can click on each of these. I've put on 144 subscribers in the past 28 days. Interestingly enough, I've been slowing down in terms of the number of subscribers that I'm putting on. For a while, I was putting on 400 or 500 per month, and now I'm starting to put on 200-300 or less per month. Of course, you can see that I actually lost subscribers over Christmas time, but that's, I mean, it was 2 or 3 here. You know, nowadays I'm putting on anywhere from 8 to 15 a day. And then revenue. I've made $88 this month. By the way, I have to pay taxes on that.
Right.
So
like
you know, that's not a full $88. I'm gonna lose about a quarter of that. So, and you can see, like right here, I had a big spike in revenue, which turned out to be $8. From $8. I'm balling now. I can go buy Starbucks twice. But that was off of Alex Vanover's DRL World Champion video. And then you can see there's some other interesting things like, so I've had 3,000 views in the last 48 hours. This was when my latest flight edit dropped right here. This was when the last John Eska interview dropped. Never Think Last Pack, making money on YouTube, how to get free gear. You can see the view numbers there. The interesting thing about, and then you can see these are top videos in this period, and this is by views. So Mr. Steele got jalapenos on his junk. I mean, I knew as soon as I put the title up that this one was going to do really well. Because who doesn't want to find out about Steele getting jalapenos on his junk? Chad Nowak's mental health. Chad Nowak dominating the top 3. That's not a surprise. This one's interesting because the Mr. Steele video that I did, 6-8 months ago, has resurfaced. And so I've had 2,300 more views from just this video over the past 28 days, which is a little bit surprising considering just how things play out. Like, a lot of things don't resurface like this, and this particular interview has resurfaced a lot. And so if we dive into it, you can actually see that I've made $100 off this interview. Like, that's really
not
good.
bad.
That's not bad at all, of course. But then you also have to figure that I had 41,000 views. So let me see the revenue. I think revenue will tell me what my CPM is. Okay, so CPM it's an interesting term. It is the cost associated, or the value associated in this instance, the value associated with 1,000 impressions. So it's not 1,000 views, it's 1,000 impressions. So for every 1,000 impressions that go like, and an impression in this case is, it shows up on, the YouTube watch page, or it shows up as a watch more, or it shows up on the side tab, wherever it shows up. Each of those is an impression. For every 1,000 impressions that I pull, I get $4.07. I tend to get $4.72. And that is, like, you can see how spiky that gets. So right here, some random day, I had a $32 CPM, which is just insane. But I bet if we look at, if we go back to, yeah, like you can see September, what was that? Sometime September, like, it didn't really increase very much during that time period. So a CPM of 472 is not bad. If you go back to, let's look at one other thing. Reach shows you, this is an interesting graph right here. Reach shows you, this is the number of impressions I've had from this video, which is almost 500,000. I had a 4.9% click-through rate, which is actually pretty high, resulting in 24,000 views from impressions. So about half the views from this video came specifically from YouTube suggesting it. And then you can see that, there was a little bit that came through suggested search. It ultimately generated, and maybe this is just in the last 28 days, but it generated 6.1 thousand hours of watch time. So, if any of you are interested in, like, diving into YouTube in general, the thing you got to realize is that, like, it's not about subs. Subs are just a vanity metric.
Right.
It's about watch time, and it's about click-through rate, and those directly correspond to title, and they correspond to the thumbnail. And so because that's kind of like, it's the entrance to the video, right? If your thumbnail and if your title catch somebody's interest, they're going to click. Once they click, if they watch for a while, then YouTube will push your video harder than if they don't click, or if they click and watch it for 30 seconds. So if you really want to screw somebody's channel up, go and watch all their videos for 5 seconds over and over and over again. that will actually degrade the performance of their videos. Turns out my average watch time is right around 10 minutes. So I do pretty well, but then I also have really long form content. And then
what's an average interview run for you? About 30 minutes or something?
So an average interview can run anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. And what I do is I typically chop it up into 3, 4, maybe 5 segments. I tend to go in with 2 to 4 topics that I'm interested in hitting. And sometimes we hit them, sometimes we don't. I typically have a bunch of questions prepared in advance. Oftentimes I get 2 or 3 questions out of like 15 that I might prepare asked. So there is a lot of preparation that goes into each interview.
Yeah, Remy Timmy wants to know how you plan them out. He has people who are relevant, interesting, or will generate views, and what are your priorities?
So go through. Hold on, let me see. I'll switch over here real quick. Who was it? Remy Timmy?
Yeah.
Let me find him. Remy Timmy. Michael, how do you plan interviewees? People who are relevant, interesting, will generate views. So I actually have. So how do I plan interviews? It's kind of ad hoc. It's as I think about them. It's people that I think are relevant to the current status of the industry. So interestingly enough, I'll be interviewing Matty Stunts on Tuesday. He had not actually, when I reached out to him back in December, he said he'd like to come on, and he said, reach out to me in the middle of January. And I did. And that's about when he said, I'm coming back. I'm going to do something new. But he's always been, he's got a large story in the FPV space. So he's a good interview. I have other priorities though, which are like to bring attention to folks that deserve attention. So like guys like John Eska or Rob Garland.
I really enjoyed the John Eska videos. Those were really good.
I mean, and like John, the thing with John is that he has such a good mind for this. Like, I mean, just the fact that he can put together an entire review in an hour. I mean, soup to nuts, like everything, sit down, write a script, film, edit, done. 1 hour. Like that's insane. He's got his productivity so tight that he can do that. But he doesn't have a huge channel, but he's a great reviewer. He tells the truth. In my opinion, he deserves to have that voice, that spotlight. Right. And so at this point, like, I know I'm not huge, but I have an outsized voice in this community for some reason. I don't quite understand it myself. But with John, I was like, hey, come on. And John's a friend now at this point. Like we're kind of like I'll bounce ideas off of him. He'll bounce ideas off of me. But him, tomorrow you guys might see an interview with Old Gravy Leg. There's another guy that I think he's given a lot, and it's I just want to give back. Same thing with like Rob Garland, Loco FPV. He gave an extraordinary amount to my community, and he didn't get a lot of recognition for it. So I wanted to give back to him too. So when I have my priorities, there's always the priority of like, I want to make sure that my channel does well, and I want to make sure that it's interesting. But at the same time, I don't want to be selfish and just always think about my channel. I want to give back to some of the folks that matter, that may not get the exposure that they deserve. So, and then in terms of like relevant or interesting, I think the thing about interesting is that almost everybody has an interesting story. And at the end of the day, when I'm doing these interviews, it's not about finding secrets. It's not about generating drama. It's about telling a story. And so that's what I focus on. Like I focus on the story. When I interviewed Derek Brown, the first part of that interview, he really opened up to me about going to jail or going to prison and for DUIs. And he hadn't told anybody about that. And it was just one of those moments where I was kind of like shocked and in a sense honored that he would open up to me about that. That was a profound story that really had nothing to do with FPV. But at the same time, it was a good story, and he ended up turning his life around as a result, getting into FPV, and all of a sudden it turned into good things for him. So that, I mean, that's a great story, right? So yeah, I mean, I plan out interviews in kind of an ad hoc fashion. I'd like to have Bruce back on, you know, to talk about the FAA stuff. There's a lot of folks that I do want to talk to. So, you know, I think right now there's plenty of people to talk with, so that's good.
So you want to? I know you've got gravy leg interviews coming out. You said possibly tomorrow. You got any others you can tease us with?
Yeah, we can go back to sharing if you want, but I'll stop sharing for now. Yeah, so I'll be talking to Evan Turner on Monday, talking to Maddie Stunts on Tuesday. And what I tend to do is I batch interviews. So like I'll talk to 3, 4, 5 folks at one time in a short span, and then kind of play those out over a few weeks.
Right.
Hold on one sec. Bob Ruge and I are talking about a pretty interesting formatted interview. But Evan and Maddie are the two that I have scheduled right now. And those will carry me through mid to end of February. After them, I don't know where I'll go. It just, I may find somebody that attracts my attention and I want to talk to them. Or I may try to go talk to a heavy hitter, or who knows. I mean, Chris, I think you should come on at some point. You've got a huge story in FPV history. So, you know, it'll just be different people at different times.
Yeah, I'm glad to come on whenever you want.
Love to have you, man.
So we've got some good questions rolling in. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Hit me up with them.
So 507RC wants to know, what is the best day of the week to post a video, and do you plan them out that way for the most views?
So this is one of those interesting topics in YouTube that it's hard to quantify. A lot of YouTubers believe that like Monday and Friday are the best days to drop episodes or to drop videos, and to do it at 4 p.m. Eastern. I've tried that. It doesn't work for my channel. For whatever reason, 4 p.m. on a Monday and a Friday are absolutely terrible for me. Sunday at 10 a.m. is golden. I drop every Sunday at 10 a.m. and that video always does really well. And then every day, and I'm almost the point now where I'm daily, which I never ever thought I'd get to. But every interview after the first typically decreases in terms of views. So like if I get 2,000 views on Sunday, a lot of times I'll get 1,500 or less on Monday, and then it just continues to decline unless there's some topic in there that happens to catch a lot of people's interest. The other thing I do is, except for Sunday, I drop at 8 a.m. And what I've found with that is that since we're an international community, if I drop at 8 a.m., I catch the end of the European workday. And as a result, a lot of the first people that are commenting on my videos are in European time zones. And then what will happen is through the day, as it rolls through the US, more people will comment. And then towards the end of the night, folks from Australia will start commenting. So it's really interesting what happens, you know, when you play with your times. And I've kind of settled on the 10 a.m. drop on Sunday. And to be quite honest, I could drop at 8 a.m. But I go to church. So I don't want to deal with a bunch of FPV drama in the middle of church, so I drop it at 10 a.m. instead.
Right.
And then every day after that, it's 8 a.m. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. John Hart's got a great question. He says, Michael Rollins, you have done a fair amount to spread awareness about mental health and more specifically depression, often speaking from personal experience.
Yep.
It says, how much of a factor is FPV in helping your symptoms, and are you concerned about losing that if the NPRM goes through?
So let's break that down. So yeah, I had the interview with Chad Nowak. We talked about his depressive symptoms. I'm actually bipolar. So it is, for me, it's a little bit different in the sense that depressive symptoms kind of come and go as they wish. There's no real rhyme or reason. What I will say is that on days that, let's say I'm just not having a great day, if I have the opportunity, if things align and I can step out and fly a few packs, it makes the day better, hands down. And the same token, being consistent with exercise also helps. It's hard, strangely enough, it's hard to be depressed if you're sore from lifting weights or if you've run a few miles. I think that there's something similar that happens with FPV, that is, it does something to your brain. It rewires something for just a little bit. And I don't know if that's the adrenaline rush. I don't know if that's just the sheer joy of knowing that you're flying. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I would be fascinated to see someone study it. And like when I talk to Zoe, and there's a guy around here named Carlton Bennett. Both of them are chronic pain sufferers, and it affects them as well. So they can go fly, and for 5, 10, 15 minutes, the pain subsides. Even though they live with it on a daily basis, one flight is better than, say, an opiate in terms of relief for just a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I find that flight helps my mood. Now, that's not to say that I don't take medicine to also, stabilize my bipolar, because I absolutely do. And part of actually the last 3 months, and I don't know if anybody really caught on, last 3 months were hard. I had to change meds, and I got to a point where I was just really, really in bad shape. I did him a disservice when I dropped the Ramon Grande videos. I couldn't even get it together enough to put the intros and the outros together. And so I just put them out. And I feel like I did him a disservice by that. But at the same time, I finally realized, I was like, you know what? You're not in a mental state to be able to do this well. So just do what you can and then move on. So, luckily I'm back on the upswing, if you will.
Right.
And things are getting better. So
I really appreciate you sharing that, man. I can relate. I'm bipolar too, so I
are you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Big time.
I mean, and you can understand this, and I think that a lot of folks that haven't dealt with it don't understand it. Is that, like, the way that I put it to people when they're like, what is it like to be bipolar? There's definitely, like, there's a depressive aspect to it, but then there's also the manic aspect.
Yeah, I'm the manic. My problem times are when I go manic.
Well, and I mean, that's really, honestly, most bipolar folks are more dangerous to themselves when they're manic. There's been a lot of stuff that my wife and I've, we've been drawn closer together through a lot of the stuff that's been happening. There's been a lot of honesty and truth that we've been speaking to each other. One of the things she said to me was, she just listed this mile-long list of substances that I had abused throughout the years. And it made me realize that even when I thought my manias were under control, they weren't. And it was resulting in drug-seeking behavior. And it's not like I'm a terrible addict or something. I mean, I've been addicted to Adderall. Um, but yeah, I mean, manias are something like that. They can be incredibly awesome or they can be incredibly terrible.
Yeah.
And so it is, I think a lot of people don't get to see that aspect or understand it. So
You hit it spot on though. That's the best way I've ever heard it described. Is it can be
yeah,
either really great or really terrible. I've
yeah.
suffered with addiction too, so don't worry about that. I relate to you there as well.
So I actually, and you know, we don't have to make this totally mental health focused, but I sat down with my wife and I sat down with an older couple from our church, and the husband is bipolar. Now he suffers more heavily from the depressive side of it, and that I've never really, like as a kid, I suffered with the depressive side a lot. When I hit adulthood, it kind of flipped, and all of a sudden I've dealt more with hypomanias and manias. But it was really wild hearing him talk and hearing her talk and seeing how their relationship paralleled our relationship in so many ways. And it made me realize that like a lot of these things that were in me that I always have considered character flaws, like the drug seeking behavior and the way that I'll get irritable or the way that I can always put the best face on things, were actually symptoms of the disease as opposed to being character flaws. And that was not that I'm not responsible for them, because I am 100% responsible for all of my actions. But it definitely kind of shined a light for me on, oh, I'm not a terrible person. I'm dealing with a terrible thing.
That's a fact.
Yeah. And it was kind of mind changing. It kind of switched my viewpoint pretty significantly at the time. So
I commend you for being willing to share that with us, man. I really appreciate that.
no problem, dude. What other questions
So
we got?
Double A wants, or not Double A, excuse me, Volatronics wants to know, and I know you kind of touched on this at the very beginning of the stream, but he may have not caught that. He wants to know if you have more quads than the 3 on your wall.
Those are all wall queens. They don't move. Neither does that one. This one is going to be rebuilt soon, and then
Is that the one that caught on fire?
It is, yeah.
Go check out one of Mike's most recent flight videos. Do you remember what that one's called, Mike?
No, but it's like a week old. Here's my other quad.
Damn.
This is the one from yesterday. Or was it today? I think it dropped today. I did this yesterday. I buried it. I mean, just 100%. Buried it in the ground, and it, you know, it was, so this is the fusion frame. This is the third arm I think I've broken on a fusion frame in like 4 years of flying. And it probably was weakened because it's a really old arm. I'm gonna put this down before I do any more damage.
That was a serious crash.
It was. I was coming up over a tree, and there were actually really heavy winds, and it's hard to tell in the video, but I got MQC Fusion Alex. I got pushed. The nose of my craft got pushed back, so I was actually falling like this, and I tried to pull out from underneath it. The battery was sagging. It was cold. I just didn't have enough, and so it just
couldn't quite make it.
No, man, I didn't make it at all. It was great. So yeah, that was really a fun day of flying.
I buried one like that flying with Voltronics one time. We call it the swamp quad.
Did you find it? Was that one that you like got left out, or did you find it?
No, I found it.
Okay.
It was buried though.
Yeah.
Big time.
I mean, yeah. I only disarm for fire. That's the name of the video. Yes, thank you, Remy Tim.
I was gonna say I thought it had fire in the title.
Yeah, it does have fire in it. Yeah, I think here's the other thing about if you want to catch people's attention with a flight edit, um, do something that most people won't do. I fly over water a lot. I like it. It's fun. There's a huge risk factor because where I'm flying, if I'm flying over the bay, if it goes down, I'm never getting it back. I went to my aunt and uncle's house and flew over a different part of the bay. And if it had gone down, there probably wasn't a way I could get it back. But that pucker factor that everybody experiences when they see you flying over the water it draws people in. It's a lot of fun. So
There's a
mention
lot to be said
fire.
about flying over water. It's difficult. You got to watch your nerves.
Yeah. And the other thing is that like not a lot of people, I don't know if you've ever flown over water that's completely still. Have you done that?
Yes, and it's intimidating.
Man, that's terrifying because you can't, because the horizon basically disappears.
Yeah.
And so you don't know if you're this far off the deck or if you're this far off the deck. And that the difference between those two while you're flying over water can be pretty significant. So
Pucker factor.
Yeah, pucker factor.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let's give some more shouts out to the chat.
Yeah, do it.
Got 507C, RC, 920 FPV, Alex Dalton, Chuck It, Double A, I'll get you this time, buddy. Homegrown Canadian, J-Bo, John Hart, Mr. Sicko, Navy FPV, Quad Farm, Remy Tim, Ryan's RCs, Steel Rain, and Volatronics.
Awesome.
Nice to see you, Navy says he's new here. We got Killer BRC just showed up.
Yeah.
Derek Dvorak. Nice to see some names I've not seen in a while. It's good to see all you guys.
Yeah.
If you guys got any more questions for Michael, drop them in the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to hear them. Have we really been talking for an hour and a half?
Yeah, we have.
I guess
doesn't seem like it. Kind of flew by.
Yeah.
Who would you say your favorite interview you've ever done is?
I think the favorite. All right, so if I had to pick my top two best interviews, the Chad Nowak video, the recent Chad Nowak interview was probably the best. And then the conversation that I had with Derek Brown was also really good. There was that moment of drama in the middle of it, but just the fact that he opened up like he did that's kind of what I'm going for. And then in terms of the favorite people that I've interviewed, I mean, obviously, like Chad Nowak he's kind of got a special spot in my heart, because like he's effectively the one that got me into this. So talking to him, like I very rarely go into interviews nervous. I went into Chad Nowak's first interview very nervous, and I went into Steele's interview very nervous. And I think I went into Capper's interview pretty nervous too. Other than that, I typically don't get nervous. But the other person is probably one of the funniest interviews I've ever done was Bot Grinder. I mean, that dude gives absolutely zero fucks.
Yeah,
like,
he's a hoot.
We're sitting there interviewing, and he like looks around. He's like, "You mind if I smoke up on your show?" It's like, "Yeah, go ahead, man." And like the dude ended up rolling 2 blunts in the middle of the show, just the whole time, just smoke. And I was like, it's like, I've had other guests, multiple guests, not just one, but multiple guests, tell me to stop the interview because they wanted to smoke a cigarette, right?
Right.
Bots rolling blunts. I mean,
no fucks given.
No, none whatsoever. It was hysterical. So.
Give a quick other shout out to Burger Lord, Quadrophenia, and the Lazy Rocket. What's good, you guys? Also, Richard, what's going on, my man? Richard Doberstein, one of my longtime viewers.
Very
And
cool.
Alex Dalton, I'm not sure if I got him. Dragoneers is in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just watched those bot videos
Yeah.
right before we came on, and I was cracking up because he didn't care. He was talking about it being the riding the trains and everything.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, like, right in the middle of it, he's like, "Yeah, well, I was a hobo for 15 years," and I'm like riding train hobo. He was like, "Oh yeah, 100%." God, well, let's dive into that, man.
Yeah,
It's
interesting
like,
subject number
yeah,
5.
yeah. So, my favorite type of pizza is, man, it's just boring pepperoni. I'm
Just
afraid
plain old
to say,
pepperoni.
just plain old pepperoni. It's hard to beat. I got a
Nothing wrong
question for
with
you.
that.
I got a
Yeah,
question for you. So, how long have you taken a break?
it was about a year.
Year? Okay.
Yeah, about a year.
And what do you like? What do you see as the main differences between how you interview versus how I do
Well, I don't have any kind of a plan.
it?
I've
Okay.
found that if I like write questions down and stuff, I come
Hmm.
off really robotic. Like I'm
Okay.
trying to read the question and it just doesn't work for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So my preparation is all done kind of. I prepare, but it's all in my head.
Right.
Um, and I don't know if you do that or not. I don't know if you write down stuff or not. But I find that I can't read on camera. Like it just does not work.
Yeah. I do prepare. So typically my setup will be, so I've got two monitors in front of me, cameras right here. Obviously I've got my mic. I'll have Skype going on one window over here, and then just off to the right, I'll have my set of questions. Um, but I don't typically get through most of them. They're there. Like if I need to kind of bring somebody back in from like some long tangent or to shift topics,
Right.
I'll refer back to like the first question of a segment, or I'll bring them back in with, okay, well, what about this? Um, but for me, I mean, it's easy to just kind of glance at it. Oh yeah, I remember that. So what do you think about this? And I can at least do it naturally, but I totally get what you're saying, where it's like, if you're not comfortable and you ask a question the wrong way, um, it just gets really awkward. Like I can give you, for instance,
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd
I
love to have an example of that.
so
I
I
relate.
interviewed Wild Willie, and Nick Willard. Um, Great interview. We had just a really great time. He talked a lot about editing and just doing stuff. And at some point, I really wanted to ask him about what it was like to have a relationship where your partner flies too. And so I started asking him questions about Nicole, Harley Quinn FPV. And there was just like a few minutes where it was just awkward, where I could tell he wasn't comfortable. I wasn't comfortable. I was trying to ask questions, but not come off as a creeper, uh,
Right.
and or be disrespectful or indicate that the only reason she was well known was because she's attached to him, which is 100% not the case.
And she can hold her
She's a
own.
Yeah, she can hold her own. She's a really good pilot. Um, and so that was one of those moments where it was just like I almost didn't air that segment. Um, Looking back on it, they both watched it and they both thought it was fine. But I remember during the moment, I was like, this is so freaking awkward, because I just approached it the wrong way, just 100% the wrong way. So yeah, if you're not ready, if it's not comfortable for you, then it's really not going to be comfortable for the interviewee.
Sorry, I'm typing away in the chat.
Yeah, Steel Rain. Depending on the day, I reverse the thong. It I just sometimes you just need a different feel.
Got to get that different feel. I'm with you.
Got to get the different feel.
Okay, so Double A wants to know if you have your IO ticket yet, or are you going?
I would I very much would like to go to IO. I have to clear it with the boss. If I go to IO, I'd like to bring my boys. I think it would be great for them to see it. So no, I don't have my ticket yet. But I'm going to make every effort to actually get out there and be at an event for a bit.
You can camp with your boys if you're into camping. If you're not, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
not, you'll spend as much trying to buy camping gear as you would just to get a hotel. So
Yeah, that's probably true. I really double A. After I talked to Chris, 100% would love to go to IO. So it is on my list of things that like I need to do this year. So
Steel Rain says he's glad you're a good sport.
I try to be.
All right, man.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank
I think we've about had a pretty good little session here. I'm good with you. You're
Yeah.
good.
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, man. This has been great.
No problem. Next week, next Saturday at 9, I'll have Scarecrow FPV on. And if you guys aren't already, please subscribe and smash the like button. That's about all the energy I've got right now. I'm just not into the high energy tonight. I'm more laid back.
No worries, man. Thank you.
I don't know if you're familiar with Scarecrow or not, but he did a short stint as a photographer for Rotor Riot. And he takes some amazing pictures.
Yeah.
Good flyer, too.
Oh, he's there. He's here.
Oh, yeah. He's been chilling in the background.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to it. I'll have to check it out.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm going to throw your YouTube link up in the description of the video after we get off air.
Thank you, sir.
And I appreciate everybody in the chat coming on as well. It's good to see all you guys again. And we'll see you next Saturday.
Peace out, y'all.
Peace.